you can take away from this a lot. And I think you can be a very religious person in a traditional way and take that away from it. I think it's very respectful of spirituality with a capital S.
I don't know if everyone here knows this. It is Dinah's first feature film, which is that. Yes, that is the reaction I was hoping for. When you are meeting with a young rising filmmaker that has such intention on the page, what is exciting about that for you, and what maybe scares you?
Oh gosh. Everything about it is exciting, and the only thing that scared me, that was then allayed after I spoke with her, was that I wanted to make sure she really knew what she was doing, because this is a leap of faith. At least speaking for myself, this was a huge chunk of drama to bite into, and I really wanted to do it with someone I could trust, who knew what they were doing, and if I hadn't been careful about that, this really. It really could have been a disaster. I also, by the way, I saw her, I'm sure you did too, her shorts. She's made 2 wonderful shorts, one of which was very indicative, I thought, of where we were headed. It's called The Beast. And it was actually shortlisted for the Academy Awards, and deservedly so. So it's worth checking out. It's very out there in the most wild of ways, and not dissimilar from this, but this is a bigger story, of course. But yeah.
Lola, how about you?
Yeah, I think just to echo everything that Julia said, like, you know, Dinah's such a wonderful creative. And I can't, like, how precise she is and detailed in her work really makes you just believe in her immediately and trust her. But like Julia said, like, this is a beast of a film, and there are so many elements on paper that could really not work and be disastrous. And, you know, it was just important to make sure that all the ducks were in a row. But I think once you get speaking to Dinah, you know that she knew everything inside out. She knew what she was doing.
What was it like the first time you guys met, and how did you bond?
We met during rehearsal. If I'm, by the way, just to set the stage, this was during the pandemic, the beginning of we made this film 3 years ago in London and Wales, and so this was the first project I did during the pandemic. And this was during, you know, big time quarantine days. So for example, when I got to London, I had to quarantine in a hotel room for 2 weeks. But I mean, you can't leave the room for 2 weeks. And everybody was masked, and we were getting tested every day and keeping distance, and no one was sitting close to one another. Can you imagine for a rehearsal for a film like this?
Visors.
We had visors. Meanwhile, you know, all I want to do is pick her up and hold her. But we managed. Mm-hmm. And we did a lot of talking about these roles, and there was a lot of physical contact. We were talking about this earlier today in the film, which I think really helped establish that sort of physical intimacy, helped establish a sort of an undercurrent of connection.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, again, just to echo that, like, there was a lot of detailed preparation before we went into the shoot. We both spent a lot of time with Dinah and with each other trying to understand these people, their history. Yeah. And it meant that, you know, we were so prepared. It meant that we had like a lot of freedom then when it came to shooting, because everything then was coming from a place of complete authenticity.
Something that Julia and I talked about earlier today is Zora and Tuesday have perspectives and points of view that you would expect from the opposite character. Tuesday is very practical about what is going on and what's going to happen, and Zora is the one who, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to pick up the phone when my daughter calls. It's stuff that you're not expecting her to do. What about that was exciting for you guys to do? Because it's just, every time they do something, you're not expecting it, but then you really get to know these people, and it makes them feel so much more real.
Well, I thought it made psychological sense, speaking for myself. I mean, I could understand these nut job choices that Zora was making. I really could in my heart. And I think she was operating almost subconsciously. She wasn't in control of choices she was making. And her daughter was the parent until that flips, of course, at the end. As I say that, I get goosebumps because it was so, the transition was ginormous, going from child parent to child parent. But her daughter led the way in so many ways. And death led the way too.
Yeah.
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 I think, Tuesday is somebody who has an amazing ability to not only handle and hold her own pain and the burden of that, but also her mother's. But I think ultimately, like, she's just seeking the ability to relinquish that and have permission to just be a child, and let go. But she's not able to do that, and she has to hold that space for her mother and guide her. And Zora definitely makes like a lot of questionable decisions, but I think what's beautiful about this film is, she's not a bad mother and she's not a bad person. She's just screwing up a little bit because she's blinded by her own love for her daughter, which is so big and so enormous.
So I'm going to say a weird question in other contexts. Let's talk about death. Because I think these people would love to hear how you actually filmed these scenes with the giant death macaw. Julia, do you want to explain a little bit about that process? Because it's wonderful.
Absolutely. It was such a joy. I didn't mean that as a joke. A wonderful actor named Arinze, now I'm always going to say his last name, Kene. Because I always used to say it wrong. Anyway, Arinze Kene, wonderful English actor. He played the macaw. He was there for every single scene that we shot on set with us, dressed in orange. And he embraced the physicality of the bird, the emotional life of death, as it were, and even his facial expressions they were filmed. And then what happened was the animators took all of that and animated over him, but while using everything that he gave to the part, including expression. And by the way, believe it or not, that voice is his. He did that to his voice. There is no alteration. There's nothing going on there except Arinze's voice that he devised for this role. So he's a cast member, and he's a lead in the film. And he did a remarkable job. We could never, ever, ever have done what we did without him. Never, ever, ever. Yeah, it deserves applause.
Lola, do you remember the first scene that you filmed with him?
I can't remember what the first scene we shot was, but I remember the first time we rehearsed together. And I honestly thought that we were just going to sit across from each other and he was just going to say the lines. And the next minute he was on his knees in this like remarkable position and was a parrot, and that extraordinary voice came out, and I was like, okay, this is going to be good. This is going to be good. And in a way I wish everybody could see it, but what he did was remarkable work, and I don't think either of our performances would have been the same without having him there and in the room. And he's such a generous actor and a real Renaissance man, and is so giving and so open and so bold. And, for him to immediately lead the way with that boldness, I think emboldened me to, make decisions and be freer. So, yeah, I can't sing his praises enough.
Julia, we also talked today about the scene where you get really big. And I think these people would love to hear how that was actually pulled off, because I really enjoyed hearing about that myself.
Well, it happened in many different ways, all sort of stitched together. Let's see, I get big first on the ladder when we're switching the light. And that was the moving of the ceiling, obviously, so that I like that, and the camera, of course. But what was really cool and somewhat difficult actually was when I became ginormous in the living room scene, the first time you really see. We shot that. They created a box for real. I'm going to tell you, a box like that. No, maybe like that. And I crunched down into it, and they shot me doing the scene there. And then, of course, they, did what they call a clean plate of the living room. And so, I performed the scene there, and then, digitally or in post-production, they put it in. But I'm telling you, I was in a tiny box, and I got the worst feet cramps from it. But it was well worth it, because it's really a cool-looking moment when I'm frozen in that living room, shell-shocked.
And then later, when you are, did it call them errands, is you're on your quest, and Lola is on, ginormous Julia's back. Lola, what was that process when you're in your little backpack sling?
Yeah, that
was crazy.
A crazy rig that, first of all, I was on, those wires were like cheese wires
cutting into your thighs, yeah.
And I was in the sling, and they had created this rig that we would walk through the streets and we would have you and I would be in the sling, but my weight was being held by the rig. And then sometimes I would be in it on my own, and then sometimes you were in it, and then we kept having to maneuver my leg. I was worried at some points that I looked like a prawn, and I was like, is this going to work? I look a bit like a shrimp. I don't know what's going on. But it was really a trust the process kind of gig.
Right. And some of it didn't work and ended up on the cutting room floor. So that's good too.
When you see the final film, what are the visuals like versus the visuals you imagined in your head the first time you read the script or the first time that you talked to Dinah?
Well, really the visuals, when we were shooting it, we were able to watch playback a lot. So we got to see sort of the raw look of the film on the day. However, what we didn't get to see was any of the animation, any of it. So that was like, fingers crossed, please God, let these people know what they're doing. And so for me, that was the biggest change, was to see this this bird come alive. And we saw it, I'm sure you saw it too, multiple stages, when it was partially done and then a little bit more done. And it took a full year to build that from an animation point of view. It was a lot of detail in the feathers and so on. So that was the biggest change, was that, frankly.
Lola, what was like the first time you see a scene where you're talking to death and he's a giant macaw?
I think I have such a funny relationship with it, because I truly began to see Arinze in that way. And so I had like so much affection, and like to the point where we had this buck on set of the parrot, and I truly began to have like extraordinarily like fond feelings for this like PVC or whatever it was, like buck, it's a testament to Arinze's performance, of course, that he could bring all that. So I think it was a lot of trust in the process. And, I think if the animation and the CGI and that stuff had went wrong, this really could have fallen flat in its face, only because it's so big and so fantastical. It really has to work. You have to believe the world. And I think when I saw it for the first time, I was like, sick.
The film also has a really wonderful message about the power of art. And unexpected art, like a rap song that can really bring people together. Can you talk about when Dinah was like, this is going to be sort of, the pin that holds the emotion together is a classic rap song?
I wouldn't expect anything less from Dinah. I think, she was so clear in her vision, and when she explained what it meant to her and what it meant to the piece, it all made total sense. And when Arinze and I shot it, that was such a joyful day. And, ultimately, like, the kinship between Tuesday and Death is two people so burdened by other people's pain and having to carry the weight of that, and they immediately see that in each other, and that's where the kinship sparks. And for them, a good day is just a day that's free of that, and that's what that song means to them.
This is so nice that we can talk about it because you guys have all seen the film. The film has a very distinct answer about the presence of God and the afterlife. And I think it's so beautiful. I'm getting choked up thinking about it. I know some of you people were crying. I saw you outside. What, as performers and as people, does that message about, hey, there's no God, but this is the afterlife, what does that mean to you?
Well, that's not what I took away from. So that's good, because we all have our interpretation. I'm not sure that the film is saying there is no God.
Not God as we think of God. God
Oh, I
on
see.
high in a cloud somewhere.
Oh, I see. In the most traditional sense, yes. I think the film affirms the mystery of life and afterlife, and I think it affirms the notion of, something that I believe, which is that after someone is gone, that doesn't necessarily mean they're gone, and the way you live your life is how they live. And I would even add, just speaking for myself personally, that it's a new kind of relationship that happens, having had people in my own life pass away. The relationship hasn't ended, it's just shifted. But I still feel very connected to people in my life who have passed on. So I think but that's me. You can take away from this a lot. And I think you can be a very religious person in a traditional way and take that away from it. I think it's very respectful of spirituality with a capital S. Yeah. Yay for spirituality.
Lola, what can you add to that? That's perfect.
Yeah. I don't know what happens after this. I don't know if I want to know. I know that for me, I feel like it's important in a way to not worry yourself with that and live like a good person and put good out into the world, because that's what you want to leave behind, and not because you feel like you're going to be rewarded in some way. And I definitely feel like that what it says about the people that are left behind and the people that go is very true, and that they do live on, and in the way that you honor them and their memory and their life, and you talk about them. And when my granny passed, she had a chair in the living room, and none of us could bear to sit in it or go near it. And I was so worried about seeing this empty chair. But I absolutely did not see it as empty at all. It wasn't empty. Like, I see her there every time I see the chair. And, I speak to my granny every day. Yeah. And I feel like she leads me a lot. And I don't know what I believe or who I believe in, but I believe in my granny. And, that feels like good enough for me.
I think that's It doesn't get any better than that. I think that's the perfect place to end, and that everyone can go out and talk to people in their lives about this wonderful film and the things they can take away from it. So, Julia, Lola, thank you so much for being here
Thank you
with
for
us.
having us.
I do
Thank
have
you
to
for
ask everyone to stay seated so we can get these guys out of here. They're
Thanks,
on to the
everybody.
next. Thank you all so much for staying.